It's the afternoon of April 13th, 2026. 80 nautical miles south of the Strait of Hormuz, the commanding officer of the USS Harry S. Truman receives a transmission that hasn't been authorized outside wargame simulations in over 50 years. Blockade execute Alpha Romeo Delta, not a containment operation, not a freedom of navigation patrol. A full naval blockade of Iranian ports enforced by the most lethal surface action group ever assembled in the Persian Gulf. Every Iranian-flagged vessel attempting to enter or exit gets turned back, boarded if necessary, disabled if it resists. 20% of the world's crude oil supply, severed from global markets with a single transmitted code phrase. This is day 45 of Operation Epic Fury, the combined US-Israeli campaign that launched on February 28th, when airstrikes killed Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and dismantled the Islamic Republic's command infrastructure. A fragile 2-week ceasefire collapsed. Peace negotiations in Islamabad ended without agreement on April 12th, and President Trump authorized something every previous administration, Republican and Democrat alike, had considered strategically unthinkable. A maritime siege of a sovereign nation while a ceasefire technically remains in force for 8 more days. The question at 14:01 hours isn't whether Iran will respond. It's which axis of retaliation arrives first, and whether the Aegis combat management systems protecting the carrier can absorb the counterstrike before the Truman itself becomes a floating target, representing $250 billion in hardware and 5,000 American lives. The IRGC has been wargaming this exact scenario for 6 straight weeks. The officers aboard the Truman know it. They have 12 minutes to find out what that plan actually looks like. To understand how we got here, you need to rewind 14 hours. At 01:05 hours local time on April 12th, Vice President J.D. Vance stepped off a C-32A executive transport at Noor Air Base in Islamabad, Pakistan. Flanked by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Senior Advisor Jared Kushner, the American delegation arrived carrying what Vance publicly called a final and best offer. 15 points, non-negotiable at the core. Complete dismantlement of Iran's nuclear enrichment program. Verifiable limits on ballistic missile production and deployment. Unconditional reopening of the Strait of Hormuz to all commercial traffic. Enforceable restrictions on IRGC proxy networks operating across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. This was the first in-person US-Iran negotiation since the JCPOA talks in 2015, the highest-level diplomatic contact since the 1979 revolution. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf spent 9 straight hours reviewing that framework inside a secure wing of the Pakistani Foreign Ministry compound. Then they rejected it. At 2200 hours on April 12th, Vance boarded his aircraft and departed without ceremony. 3 sentences to the press corps on the tarmac, delivered without ambiguity. The door is not closed. We depart with a straightforward proposal, a method of understanding that represents our final and best offer. We'll see if the Iranians accept it. For President Trump, 9 hours of negotiation followed by a flat rejection wasn't patience, it was weakness. By 0600 hours on April 13th, the blockade order was drafted. By 1345 hours, it was signed. By 1400 hours exactly, the Fifth Fleet was executing it under full emissions control, south of the strait. The IRGC had been monitoring every minute of Vance's departure through their intelligence feeds. They had a contingency plan rehearsed in simulation and live fire drills for 6 consecutive weeks. The Americans were about to find out exactly how thoroughly that plan had been prepared. At 14:03 hours, the E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft patrolling at 25,000 feet above the Gulf of Oman transmitted an emergency flash alert across the Link 16 tactical data network. The AN/S PY-6 AES, a radar suite aboard the USS Roosevelt, a guided missile destroyer operating on the carrier screen's eastern flank, had simultaneously detected a massive coordinated electromagnetic emission signature erupting along 340 kilometers of Iranian coastline stretching from Bandar Abbas all the way to the Kish and Malen Naval Complex. IRGC Aerospace Force Mobile Transporter Erector Launcher Units, specifically Chinese-manufactured WS-2D long-range artillery platforms and domestically engineered Noor anti-ship cruise missile batteries, were rotating from transit configuration into firing elevation. This wasn't a probe. It wasn't posturing. It was a prepared mass launch sequence. At 14:04 hours, signals intelligence intercepted from an RC-135V rivet joint orbiting at 40,000 feet north of the Omani coast captured encrypted Iranian Navy command traffic, ordering all Ghadir-class coastal submarines to emergency dive and proceed to ambush coordinates along the strait's northern approach lane. These vessels, diesel-electric submarines displacing just 120 tons and carrying heavyweight torpedoes, are specifically engineered to hunt in the shallow thermocline-rich waters where American sonar performs worst. At 14:05 hours, a P-8 Poseidon anti-submarine warfare aircraft reported acoustic contact, 3 separate low-frequency propulsion signatures consistent with Ghadir diesel plants, all moving at an estimated 8 knots on a direct convergence course with the carrier strike group. The situation had shifted in less than 5 minutes from blockade enforcement to coordinated multi-domain ambush, and the officers aboard the Truman were facing a decision that will be analyzed in war colleges for the next 50 years. If you were the commanding officer of a nuclear-powered supercarrier with 3 enemy submarines closing at 8 knots, 340 kilometers of active missile batteries lighting up your radar horizon, and a ceasefire technically still in force for 8 more days, what would you authorize? One word: engage or hold. Drop it in the comments. At 14:06 hours, the Aegis baseline 10 combat system aboard the guided missile destroyer, USS Gravely, automatically computed firing solutions against 47 discrete radar track contacts classified as missile threats. But Iran's electronic warfare doctrine, developed with assistance from Russian Krasuka-4 jamming system engineers, was simultaneously flooding the S-band radar spectrum with high-energy barrage interference, generating ghost tracks, false launch signatures, and digital hallucinations specifically engineered to exhaust the vertical launch system magazine before the real salvo even arrived. The Aegis track, via missile capability, recognized the jamming pattern in 11 seconds and automatically shifted to passive broadband discrimination mode, using Doppler shift analysis rather than primary radar reflection to filter phantom signals from genuine inbound threats. At 14:07 hours, the system flagged 12 confirmed Noor anti-ship cruise missile tracks, each one flying a sea-skimming profile at Mach 0.9, 8 meters above wave height, programmed to stay below the radar horizon until the terminal engagement phase. Time to impact on the carrier screen. Carrier, 4 minutes and 17 seconds. At that same moment, an extremely low-frequency transmission was pushed to the Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine USS Washington, sitting in a racetrack patrol pattern at 200 meters depth beneath the thermocline boundary layer. Washington's towed array sonar had been tracking the 3 Ghadir contacts for 38 minutes and had already built firing solutions on each. The submarine commander received a single execute code. Cormorant, 2 Mark 48 AD cap heavyweight torpedoes released from tubes 1 and 2, programmed for precision proximity detonation, designed to disable rather than sink the 120-ton vessels. Denial of torpedo launch capability without the propaganda gift of sunken hulls and drowned sailors. Deliberate escalation management, even in the middle of an active missile engagement. At 14:09 hours, the USS Gravely's evolved Sea Sparrow missile system and SM-2 Block 3B standard missiles ignited from their Mark 41 vertical launch cells in a rolling 12-shot salvo, filling the sky above the Gulf of Oman with supersonic interceptors traveling at Mach 3.5. Simultaneously, Phalanx close-in weapon system Block 1B mounts on all 4 destroyers of the carrier screen, spun up to 4,500 rounds per minute, creating interlocking walls of 20mm tungsten penetrators against any cruise missile that survived the outer interceptor layer. At 14:09:30, 2 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft launched from the Truman's flight deck carrying next-generation jammer mid-band pods. Their mission wasn't blanket jamming, it was surgical. The Growlers climbed to 18,000 feet and activated concentrated high-power microwave beams, targeting the 3 Ghadir submarine communications relay buoys, trailing behind the submerged contacts. In 6 seconds, the relay circuits fused. The Iranian submarine commanders lost uplink communications with their shore batteries, unable to receive updated targeting coordinates, unable to confirm launch authorizations, operating on pre-programmed instructions only. But Iran had anticipated the suppression layer, and they had a backup that didn't require electronics at all. At 14:10 hours, 16 IRGC Siraj 1-class fast attack boats erupted from 3 camouflage dock complexes along the northern Keshem Island shoreline, pushing to 42 knots on direct intercept courses into the strait. These were not platforms designed to win a fleet engagement. They were martyrdom vessels. Fire-and-forget optical guidance platforms engineered to bypass the entire Aegis electronic architecture by removing electronics from the kill chain entirely. Human eyes, iron hulls, optical missile lock. The carrier strike group was now simultaneously managing an anti-cruise missile engagement, with 7 of 12 inbound Noor missiles intercepted and 5 still tracking toward the screen. An anti-submarine engagement with Mark 48 torpedoes inbound on 3 Ghadir contacts, a surface threat engagement against 16 fast attack boats entering the engagement envelope. And critically, a strategic decision point that would be dissected in the Situation Room, the United Nations Security Council, and international courts for years to come. Every weapon fired, every ship damaged, every casualty, all of it recorded under operational rules of engagement, while a ceasefire was technically still active. At 14:11, 58 hours, Gravely's close-in weapon system destroyed a Noor cruise missile 310 meters off the carrier's starboard bow. The warhead detonated in midair, raining shrapnel across the destroyer's deck. 7 sailors wounded, no penetrating hull damage. The ship remained combat capable, but the 12th Noor missile was not targeting the carrier screen. Its terminal guidance seeker had locked onto a different radar signature entirely. The automatic identification system transponder of a Panamanian-flagged supertanker, the MV Pacific Horizon, carrying 2.1 million barrels of Saudi crude oil, sitting stationary 7 nautical miles astern of the carrier formation after being ordered to heave to under blockade enforcement protocol. The Noor seeker found the largest radar cross-section available, and at 14:12:11 hours, the missile impacted amidships. The explosion was visible from the Truman's flight deck, a plume of fire and black smoke rising 300 feet into the air above the Gulf. At 14:13 hours, 13 minutes and 11 seconds after the blockade became active, President Trump received the first casualty report in the Situation Room. 7 U.S. Navy sailors wounded, 1 civilian supertanker struck and burning, 3 Iranian Ghadir submarines surfacing under duress after Mark 48 proximity detonations ruptured their ballast tanks, and 16 IRGC fast attack boats retreating under concentrated fire from the carrier's F/A 18F Super Hornet Combat Air Patrol, which had descended to 500 feet and systematically disabled their propulsion systems with AGM-65 Maverick missiles, incapacitating the crews, not killing them. Deliberate military restraint, carefully calculated for the diplomatic narrative that would follow in the next 48 hours. By 1600 hours, mediators from Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey were transmitting emergency de-escalation frameworks to both Washington and Tehran. The ceasefire, expiring April 21st, was holding by a thread, but both sides had fired, both sides had wounded personnel, and 2.1 million barrels of Saudi crude were spreading across the surface of the Strait of Hormuz in a burning slick that oil markets had not yet fully priced in. Brent crude futures spiked 11% in after-hours trading within 90 minutes of the first images reaching financial networks. Insurance premiums for tanker transits through the Gulf increased 400% before New York markets opened the following morning. 23 supertankers en route to the strait diverted to alternate routes around the Cape of Good Hope, adding 14 days and $3 million per voyage in operating costs. The global oil supply chain, already strained by production cuts and refinery bottlenecks, absorbed a shock it had no margin to withstand. And on the other side of the world, at exactly the same hour, the Truman was absorbing shrapnel over the Gulf. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced full operational control of the Luhansk region in eastern Ukraine. The fourth such announcement in 6 weeks, each one disputed by Kyiv. In the previous 24 hours alone, Russia had launched 7,700 kamikaze drones, conducted 107 separate combat engagements across the front line, and pressed assault forces into the streets of Kupiansk city. Zelensky's Easter truce proposal had been rejected outright. Russian drones struck Odessa on Orthodox Easter Sunday, killing children in the streets. Ukraine responded by destroying 59 Russian artillery systems in 24 hours and launching 115 mid-range drone strikes in March alone, up from 41 in January. A war entering its 6th year with no ceiling in sight, no diplomatic framework capable of bridging the gap between the two sides, and no indication that either Moscow or Kyiv is prepared to accept anything less than total strategic victory. 2 simultaneous wars, 2 escalation spirals, 1 diplomatic window closing fast. The world in April 2026 is not standing at the edge of a cliff. It is already in free fall. And the question is not whether someone will reach for the parachute, it is whether they will find it before impact. What do you believe happens before April 21st when the ceasefire expires? Does Iran accept the final US offer? Or does the Strait of Hormuz become the opening act of something far larger than anyone in Washington or Tehran is prepared to survive? Leave your strategic analysis in the comments. And if you think the world needs to understand exactly what is unfolding in these waters right now, hit that like button and subscribe, because the next 72 hours will define the next decade. The Truman is still on station. The missiles are still loaded. And somewhere beneath the thermocline, 3 surfaced Ghadir submarines are being escorted back to Bandar Abbas, carrying with them the terrifying proof that the opening move of this blockade was not the last. The clock is still running,